and we need a 2-minute intro on the video because intros and really stupid music.
Dude, meeting started.
Hey folks, we should probably go ahead and get started. Let's see, what is new? We've got an update coming eventually for Animesh, which is going to be just a merge. The viewer release updated not too long ago, and so we'll be picking that up. I think there's a couple of bug fixes in there too. We'll put that in the release notes when it goes out.
Hasn't that been merged already?
We have a build that has the merge in it. We're just waiting for QA on it before we release it to Project Viewer.
Oh, okay. Because I was just looking into the code and I think I saw these new changes.
Yeah, if you're looking at anything recent, that's probably what it is. We picked up the Mate Margarita release code. Let's see. So I can talk a little more about what's going on with Animesh, but before we get too deep into that, see if anybody else has things to say. Ryder, do you want to say anything about the latest on EAP?
Well, let's see. I was on vacation last week, so stuffing myself with turkey. So not a whole lot got done. I am rapidly moving the settings stuff over from the new viewer into the sim host, so the server will support them, and then I'll set it up so that they can be stored and that sort of thing in inventory rather than importing the old presets.
New settings?
Pardon?
New
The
settings?
new settings are not in there are no new settings yet.
Oh.
There is now going to be an internal object for generic settings. And our first implementation of those settings are going to be day cycles, skies, and water. And they're set up so that we can expand them in the future.
Will never happen.
Pardon? I didn't quite catch that.
Volumetric clouds will never happen. It would be nice.
Volumetric clouds are not in scope.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Let's
But
have
that would be
volumetric
cool.
land first. We'll make everything out of blocks.
You mean like in pretty much every game today?
At least one really popular one. All right. Anything else, Ryder? Or are we is that it?
That's about it. Progress is moving forward. If I can, let's see. Yeah, progress is moving forward. Hopefully I'll be able to have at least a viewer to play with right after the Christmas break ish.
Yeah.
But
Sounds
don't
good.
hold. But don't. Yeah, soon after the Christmas break, where soon is some number greater than one.
Some arbitrary number. When is soon TM?
All right. Well, everybody forget you heard that, but it sounds good.
Forget what?
Exactly.
What are you talking about?
All right. So I guess we can talk about things Animeshi. One of the more fun aspects has been that trying to support Animesh has led to a problem in the appearance service. The bake service basically needs to know whether your attachments are actually attached to your avatar, or whether they're just things that are sort of floating around your avatar like an Animesh object, in order to know whether those joint positions actually matter for calculating your height. And so if they get that wrong, then your height gets messed up. So we have a fix for that in development now in QA. So that fix should be included with Anchor's pending baking service update that also increases the texture size 1024. So I don't have a definite time frame on when that comes out, but whenever it does, that will also handle Animesh, and obviously that'll need to go out before Animesh itself goes to release. Probably in the usual order of things, we'll wind up bringing it to a DD first, so it'll work in the test regions before it gets released everywhere. Lucia asks, is that a server update? It's a baking service update, so it's a back-end thing, but it's not actually on the simulator. It's another piece of infrastructure that's floating around out there. No viewer change on that one, right? Let's see. So we did not have a meeting last week, and I think the last thing we talked about before wrapping up our last meeting was the change to allow non-mesh objects to live at their root. Has anybody had a chance to play around with that much yet? I'm curious, to what extent that's addressing some of the concerns people had about being restricted to just meshes in their Animesh link sets. Lucia says use it with characters and also don't do it. Is the don't do it about the Baking Service 1024, or is it about something else? Yeah. Anybody else? Meta, you got a chance to look at it yet?
I did look at it today, but I didn't like other. I can link to a prim, but the prim doesn't alter anything for me. Like whether I put the script in the prim or the Animesh, the height it is unaffected by the height. Like it doesn't matter what difference the prim is from the Animesh. Like I could put the prim way down on the ground and the Animesh way up in the air. It would make no difference.
Well, that's true. The relative positioning isn't going to matter because the way it works is that the skeleton gets positioned relative to the root object, right? So, like the root joint of the skeleton gets positioned at the, if I recall correctly, at the object location of the root prim. So, and then all of the meshes just follow along wherever the skeleton is, at least as far as the visible display goes. But it does give you something that you could potentially update, right? If your root object was some kind of a invisible block with physics properties or whatever, then you could move it around, and then the skeleton would follow along, right?
Yeah, but as like I was hoping as to use it as an offset, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of the meshes are going to be kind of aligned with each other because they're all driven by the same skeleton, right? So, I mean, the only question is then, given a collection of meshes and a root prim and whatever, how do you decide where to place the skeleton? So, what we're doing now is placing it relative to the root prim, which I don't know. It seems to make some kind of sense, but if you've got like offsets in your meshes themselves, you could have a bunch of meshes that are offset in different directions, right? But they're clearly not going to get displayed that way because when they're animated, they're all actually driven by the same underlying skeleton. Sia asks about bug 139336. Yeah, I know they give more control. Whether that actually belongs as a script function or a thing you control by editing the object, I'm not sure. It's also and it's also just a question of whether it's in scope for the project. We're trying to get this puppy out the door. But yeah, that's a good point. That is there as a proposal. And regarding the earlier discussion, no, I'm not going to bring up mod keys. We're they're in their own project at this point, so we're just trying to wrap up the remaining bugs on Animesh and get it shipped. All right. Well, anybody have other questions about things Animesh-oid? I'm not sure. We've got a lot of new content. There's probably a couple of bug fixes in the pipeline that'll be coming with the next release, but I can't remember what they are offhand. Yeah. Performance testing. No, you can't start that until we're feature complete. I don't think that any of the remaining work that we're going to be doing on Animesh is going to have a big effect on performance, but I don't really know that until we've had a chance to dig into the issues that we're trying to get resolved. So you always want to be doing the performance testing kind of at the end. So yeah, that's the answer for how far off are any modifications to land impact and poly limits. We've talked about this a bit in the Animesh forum recently too. Basically the performance measurement and the cost tweaking is kind of the last stage before release, right? You want to make sure you're feature complete, that everything works as intended, that you fixed all the bugs you're planning to fix, and then you test the performance to see how everything shakes out. So that doesn't mean that it gets done and 5 minutes later we go to Agni, but it does mean that it's kind of the last stage, and once we get to that stage and come up with what we think are the final numbers, there's still going to be some time left when things are percolating on Aditi and are getting QA'd and so forth, but in terms of the ordering, that kind of comes at the end. We do still have a fair number of remaining bugs to address for Animesh, including a couple of crashes. So that's the current top priority, is getting those hammered out. Yeah, imposturing is one thing that we do want to get in there. I'm not sure the right way to account for imposturing in terms of something like land impact, because do you assume it's getting shown or do you assume it's not getting shown? And then we hopefully don't have to scrap it, but we'll see. I think if the performance was hopeless, people would be letting us know by now.
The thing about the performance tweaks or whatever, I mean, I guess we're going to have to live with not knowing until we know, but that also means that we can't do any testing over 20K until that happens. So, I mean, for I think quite a few of us, it's, you know, a kind of useless work to lower our prims or our vertices or triangles just for this brief period.
Yeah. Well, that's true. It's you know, I think it's very likely that the ultimate limit, you know, if there winds up being a hard cap, is going to be higher than 20K. So, um, you know, it wouldn't make sense to go try to do a full development of a new product line or something, you know, based on that limit. You know, what I really hope we're getting at this stage is more like proof of concept tests, right? You don't necessarily figure out how to make your uh, you know, your dog that can ride a horse that can ride a unicorn or whatever, but you you try it out with a you know, a sphere on a cube on a torus and see if it works, you know, that kind of thing. So, because you know, the point being we're trying to identify and fix bugs first. So if you know, kind of test the basic functionality first, then that's really helpful for us. But in terms of, you know, at what stage it's reasonable to tackle, you know, kind of full feature development, you know, I hope that's encouraging that you know, if you feel like you're at the stage where you want to do full feature development, then I hope that means that sort of Animesh in its current form basically works for you. Um, but you know, we're definitely hoping for you know, feedback either way on that.
I think right now the limits just pretty so low that it makes it difficult to do a whole lot. And I mean, basically, I have two clients right now that are both gung ho about Animesh, uh, Carrie being one of them. But both models are like right at 20K, or I mean, that's without, you know, that's with barely having eyeballs, no teeth, no nothing else. So I think 20K is like right in that area where, you know, if you're going to have a model that you're going to care for, you know, Animesh pet, it's going to be right in those numbers.
Hmm. Yeah. So you know, we'll try to get the final numbers as soon as we can. You know, we're not delaying just to cause pain and suffering, but the point is we're trying to avoid coming up with numbers that ultimately turn out not to be sustainable. It's, you know, it's better to start out conservative and become more generous over time than to, you know, wait for people to go down some big development pipeline and then say, oh, oops, these are too expensive. You know, we've got to cut the maximum complexity in half.
Well, I think as developers, I mean, it's one thing if we're gonna, you know, we constantly made this comparison of, you know, a bunch of rats running around versus something that you care for and play with. So, you know, I think it just comes down to that, really. Because that's the thing. We're gonna try and get it down as low as we can, but as soon as it starts looking blocky, I mean that's as low as we can go.
Yeah. Yeah. So Carrie says that even for testing, you need 50K. 150K. Honestly, I doubt we're going to release at 150K. Um,
50K gives us lots of room to play with.
yeah. Yeah, basically, we're trying to avoid having Animesh turn into just the insane resource pig that avatars have become. We've got busted calculations for figuring out what the impact should be for objects in world, and people have figured out how to game that to get low cost for insanely complicated items. It would just be a disaster to go forward with Animesh working the same way. It's just gonna bring the grid to a standstill. Um, so I know it's annoying. I mean no, nobody likes limits, and I don't, as we said before, we don't really know exactly what the limits are going to be yet. But um, there's just no way that we could have all of these sort of autonomous objects running around in the scene that are just as horribly high load as everybody's favorite super blinged out avatars. It's a non-starter. All right, let's see. Really, what's the use case? I know you said this before that even if the land impact is 10,000 or whatever, at least you can make it as high res as you want. Well, who's going to use that? I mean, I don't understand the use of an item that takes up 10% or 50% of the resources of a region. Who's gonna use one of those? What are they going to use it for? So there's a question about how our scale and animation size going to be linked. I'm not sure if I understand the question there. So when you're talking about scaling M pelvis, are you doing it through an animation or using the shape sliders? What's the mechanism? Anyway, I haven't really done any testing with scaling M pelvis. I don't have any reason to believe that the behavior would be different than it is for avatar meshes, at least not intentionally. Okay, so question about 60-meter tall animeshes. We don't have any specific things in place to prevent that, and if we wanted to prevent that, it would be, I think it would be a fair amount of work because, there's a lot of different ways that you could make your objects bigger. You can go in, make an animation that moves all the joints. You can define, joint positions within your mesh. There's I we don't have any specific plans to add, additional limits for Animesh that are, different from whatever you, can or can't get working with avatars. Yeah, it's a good question about how it's going to LOD. I think there's already some issues with Animeshes and maybe other meshes as well, not switching LODs kind of at the distances where they should. But at least theoretically, it's supposed to be based on the displayed dimensions rather than the nominal dimensions. Yeah. I'll make a note to look into that. If anybody actually wants to give me a test object that demonstrates this, that would be helpful. I'm more of a coder than a content creator, but I'll make a note to look into it. Oh yeah, the land impact is broken. Sure, that's part of what I was talking about before. That we've got some deficiencies that are especially problematic in the case of skinned meshes, which historically that hasn't been such a big deal because skinned meshes were only on avatars which didn't have land impact anyway. But if we're going to let things loose in the world, we either need to have non-broken land impact calculations for them, or we need to have some other complexity limits like the triangle counts. You certainly have to allow for the possibility. The land impact can't adjust dynamically as you run animations or whatever. So you've got to make some kind of default assumption about what size these things are going to be without taking that into account. And obviously we can't break existing content, but we could have a separate land impact formula that just applies to animeshes, right? They're not pre-existing content, so they could have any formula that makes sense. It's more a question of what how much that affects development time. Why aren't we considering animesh specific land impact? We haven't ruled it out. It's just more it's just more development, more stuff to try to get right. And you can toggle Animesh on and off. You can, and in fact, the land impact updates when you do that. That's actually one of the main reasons we put in the completely arbitrary, has nothing to do with what's going to release. 200 land impact for Animeshes was just to to make sure that we're doing those calculations correctly, so you can see that when stuff gets toggled, that the land impact updates accordingly. Oh, the toggle will be in release, but just if you toggle it, you change your land impact, so then things will get updated accordingly. An LSL function for toggle Animesh. I don't know. We've had a couple of requests for it. I haven't heard a lot about kind of what the compelling use cases for it are. So if anybody wants to comment on that, I'd be happy to discuss it. I think I asked somebody that in the Animesh forum in the last couple of days, but haven't heard back. Sure, Beck, what's the use case? Lower the land impact. Yeah, I wouldn't focus on this as a tool for lowering land impact until we actually know, something about what the land impact is going to be. Again, the 200 or whatever is arbitrary, and I don't necessarily expect that the final LI is going to be a lot different than what it is for static meshes. But until we get a chance to look at performance stuff, we just don't know. In terms of performance, I think if you're not actually running animations on these guys, I don't know. I suppose the fact that they're getting, if they're getting displayed with skinned, that is going to have some performance impact.
I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if, like, you set it? I mean, it could be an easy script function that, unless an avatar was around, it's not Animesh.
Toggle snakes on and off. Yeah, well, of course, anytime I hear about a request to do something new in LSL, the first thing I think of is how somebody's going to try to use it to do animation at 60 frames a second for, calling the bake service that many times or whatever. Let's see, a question about news for baking on Mesh. Let's see. I mentioned the status on the appearance service stuff. That's still the first stage, and it also has a fix for Animesh in there now. So Bake Service will get updated for 1024. Anchor and I have been talking about, more specifically how we're going to try to tackle Bakes on Mesh, and I think he's going to have some time to be working on that in the relatively near future. So. Hopefully we'll have more to say about that in the coming weeks, but I don't have anything more detailed right now. comment about having LSL functions for things that you can use in an editor. I think that's reasonable, except to the extent that someone is trying to do it a lot more frequently because they can automate it. There may be performance reasons why that's bad. I think the bigger question is, does it make sense to have something you can control only via LSL functions and not in the editor? For example, we've got this request for LLset animated offset, which would let you, reposition your skeleton using LSL, but there still wouldn't be any way to do it, through the build tools. So that's obviously it's less discoverable and less intuitive for people who are just poking around in the UI trying to do stuff. For someone who's comfortable with LSL, it's probably not a big deal, but that does leave out a good percentage of users. Oh, backing up a little bit, there was a comment. Was it Carrie said that they've got a workaround for the linking problem? I'd be really curious to hear more about that if you want to comment. Okay, so the HUD drives everything, and then if you want to add I don't know, you want to put you want to put the sweater on the dog or whatever. You know, the is that still updating the link set, but it's secure because that stuff only happens through the HUD? So what stops somebody from putting a bad actor script into the link set if it's modified? Or is it just that if they do put a bad actor script in, the bad actor script can't do anything? Yeah. So it's as far as I could tell from the previous comments, the concern really is basically just about link messages, right? It's not there's not like a whole lot of different things that evil scripts can do. It's basically that one thing. Yeah. there are. I should have known. Yeah, okay, well, that sounds interesting. Have you had a chance to try it out yet? Or still working on getting it set up? Okay. Well, um, I don't know. I guess I'll talk to Alexa about this. I'm not, as I said before, we really can't, we can't make adjustments that we're not confident that we can sustain and release because we don't want to, break people's content later. Um, my preference is to try to do things in one stage because it's less confusing. But if you're running into serious obstacles with this, it's and if we're confident that 50K is sustainable in the final product, then we might be able to bump that up. I'll talk to Alexa about it and see what
Anything
she thinks.
higher would help us. Even 25 would help us.
20,001. How about that? All right. Well, let me talk to Alexa about that. We can follow up on this next meeting.
Well, I'll just say that if we can get it a little bit higher, then we can work on our final model and start doing everything. I mean, there's like tons of animation and stuff that has to be done for all this. So if we can get it a little bit higher, then we can work on our final model instead of dicking around with other stuff. You know?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned, it's really the primary goal at this stage is to sort of test the viability of the product rather than the helping everyone make their final products, which it's great if they can, but it's not the primary reason that we're doing this kind of Project Viewer test period. It's always a little risky. It's always possible that the specs change in some way that makes the stuff you're working on completely non-viable or whatever. Again, I don't foresee that that's super likely, but you can't rule it out. But anyway, we'll see what we can work out on that.
And of course, our goal, in making the meshes, is to go as low as we can go until it's not it starts to look ugly, basically. I mean, at this point, that's all we can really do, and then see what our final numbers are going to be when Animesh comes out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I was talking about sort of proof of concept, I meant the kind of thing that Beck is talking about there, where, just, you know, something that simulates the structure without actually having all the detail. But perhaps I should interpret it as if people are far enough along that they're worried about the triangle limit, then there's not some more fundamental obstacle in Animesh to making viable products. I don't know for sure that that's true, but maybe that's the way to read it. All right. Did I miss anybody's question? We've got quite a bit of scroll back at this point.
Do we have a bug on how it seems to? Maybe this only has to do with pathfinding, but it seems like the everything gets turned like 90 degrees.
There is a bug for the 90-degree thing. I'm pretty sure there should be a way to prevent that with some appropriate incantations in Blender or whatever, but we don't really understand exactly what's going on there. There is a sort of a canonical orientation now, right? The standard says that the skeleton is facing in the X direction, and so your meshes, front of their body is going to wind up facing in the X direction when it's rendered with Animesh. But why that is sometimes but not always off by 90 degrees is kind of unclear. I've had some models where it happens and some models where it doesn't. So, my preferred solution for that would be if someone who understands Blender and Maya can figure out why sometimes that's a problem and sometimes not, that we just recommend, doing things a certain way so it doesn't happen. If we have to do some kind of deep dive into the, on the code level, it just adds time.
Yeah, it might be worth Gaia and Kathy to do some tests. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's some kind of fix because, as I say, not all of the models have the same behavior. Some rotate 90 degrees when you go into Animesh and some don't. Is this related to the axis alignment x equals forward? I mean, yeah, it is. As I say, that we've got it set up now so that when something is actually displayed as Animesh, rigged to a skeleton, the skeleton is always going to be facing in in the x direction relative to the prim that is at the root of the Animesh object. So then all of your meshes are going to, come along for the ride. They get oriented accordingly so that they match up to the skeleton. So the question is, why doesn't that always match up with the way it displays when it's not displayed skinned? If you're showing the mesh as a static mesh, it's often the case that it's aligned along the like the negative y-axis instead, and that's the part that we're really not sure what the right way to control that is, or whether it's an issue in the content or in the way stuff gets handled in the viewer. But yeah, I mean, there's always been the potential for 90-degree switch. The last change we made to say it's always in X changed which meshes have the problem, right? The ones that were messed up before, may have changed to being pointed the right way, and the ones that were not messed up before now have a 90-degree shift. So, but it's there's not some across the board thing that works for all of the meshes out there.